Have you ever noticed that, like when you're stuck talking about something like the weather and just feel your energy draining away? Today we're diving deep into that feeling, why small talk can be so exhausting, especially for introverts.
We know it's interesting because it really might not just be a personality thing. It turns out there's a lot going on in our brains to explain why small talk can affect us all so differently.
For real, and we're using a YouTube video to guide us through this one called Why Small Talk Drains You, The Psychology of Introverts. From the channel, The Rational Mirror, it goes way beyond just, small talk is annoying, and actually gets into like the neuroscience and psychology of it all.
Yeah, it turns out that the brains of introverts and extroverts, they actually have different thresholds for how much stimulation they can handle. Extroverts really thrive on external stimulation, while introverts can get overstimulated super easily.
So that's why I need like a 3-hour nap after I go to like a networking event. But what's actually happening in our brains that makes this the case?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the something called the parasympathetic nervous system. You can think of it as your body's like rest and digest mode.
Okay.
And it's way more active in introverts, which makes them kind of naturally inclined to be more reflective, to like deep thinking.
So forcing an introvert into a situation with constant external stimulation, like a party where they have to make small talk nonstop, is basically like working against how they're wired.
Totally, yeah. Like, for them to have to switch gears constantly to that rapid fire, really surface level conversation, It just feels jarring, unnatural.
That actually reminds me of this friend of mine who's a total introvert, and he loves deep conversations, but he avoids parties at all costs. He's always saying that he just feels so fried afterward, which makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, I bet. And it's not just the parasympathetic nervous system at play here. There are actually different neurotransmitters that are involved too. Extroverts get a rush of dopamine, like that feel-good chemical, from socializing, while introverts are driven more by acetylcholine.
Acetylcholine. Okay, that sounds familiar. Doesn't that have something to do with focus and concentration?
Yes, exactly. Acetylcholine helps with introspection and that deeper thinking. So while extroverts are getting all energized by like the dopamine rush of a party, an introvert might be sitting there just craving some quiet time so they can recharge.
That's interesting. So it's not like introverts dislike socializing at all. It's more about the type of interaction and how their brains are actually wired to respond to it.
You got it. And that actually brings us to the heart of the issue here, small talk. So the video defines small talk as this kind of social bridge, a way to ease into deeper connection. But for introverts who crave that depth, who crave authenticity, it can feel like a roadblock.
I've totally felt that. It's like you're stuck in this loop of predictable questions and responses. It just feels so pointless and honestly a little fake.
Yeah, and that fakeness can be extra draining for introverts because they really value genuine connection. And small talk can often lack that authenticity and depth that they're looking for.
Plus, it can be so tiring to constantly feel like you have to search for things to say, especially when you're not genuinely invested in the conversation.
And that's where the concept of the social battery comes in. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah, I've seen that term floating around online. But to be honest, I'm not sure I totally get it.
Okay, well, think of it as like a metaphor for how socializing actually affects our energy levels. Extroverts recharge their social battery through interaction, while introverts deplete theirs, especially in really high stimulation environments, like parties or networking events.
Okay, that makes more sense. So if I'm feeling super drained after a night of small talk, it's because my social battery is just running low. But what about the times when it's not just draining, but it actually makes you feel kind of anxious?
Small talk can definitely trigger some social anxiety, especially for introverts.
It's not just about being tired, right? It's like this added pressure to perform, to keep the conversation going, and to, say all the right things.
For sure. Introverts are more likely to overthink their responses, worry about those awkward silences, or feel uncomfortable with how superficial everything is. And, because they crave authenticity, they can really struggle with feeling like they have to perform in social situations.
And when you're constantly analyzing every word and every action, even a simple conversation can feel mentally exhausting. My brain goes into overdrive trying to figure out the right thing to say when I just want to escape.
Yeah, the video refers to this as the overthinking loop, and it's this loop that makes small talk so draining for introverts, even if the topic itself seems totally harmless.
This is all making so much sense now, like a light bulb just went off in my head. But if small talk is so hardwired to be challenging for introverts, what can we do about it? Do we just have to avoid social situations altogether?
Not necessarily. There are ways to reframe small talk and navigate those situations without having to, sacrifice your well-being or authenticity. And actually, the video gives some great tips on that, which maybe we can dive into next.
Yeah, let's move on to part 2 and explore some of those strategies. I'm actually feeling a little hopeful now. Okay, so we've established that small talk can be like a real energy zapper, especially for introverts. But honestly, it's pretty unavoidable in life, isn't it?
Totally. It's pretty much woven into how we interact. Like, it's everywhere.
So instead of dreading it, maybe there's a way we can learn to approach it differently. And I think this is where those reframing strategies from the video come in.
Yeah, so instead of seeing small talk as this pointless hurdle, the video suggests trying to see it as a bridge.
A bridge? A bridge to what?
Well, a bridge to more meaningful interactions. Think of it as the warm-up before the main event.
Okay, I kind of see what you mean. So instead of getting frustrated by those initial pleasantries, we can try to view them as a stepping stone.
Exactly. And it helps to establish a sense of comfort before you actually go into those, deeper topics.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, I know I sometimes feel a little awkward diving straight into a deep conversation with someone I don't really know. A little bit of small talk can help ease that transition.
For sure. Plus, it gives you a chance to gauge the other person's interests, which can help you subtly steer the conversation in a more engaging direction.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we take those, superficial exchanges and turn them into something more substantial?
Well, the video talks about asking what it calls meaningful questions, which is basically going beyond those really generic responses.
So instead of just saying, I'm fine, how are you, when someone asks how your day's going?
Exactly. You could try adding something like, actually, I was just thinking about insert a topic you find interesting. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, so you're subtly introducing something that genuinely interests you and kind of inviting the other person to engage with it on a deeper level. I like that.
Yeah. And another technique is to ask deeper follow-up questions. So if someone mentions their job or a hobby, instead of just nodding along and moving on, you could ask something like, what do you love most about it? Or how did you get into that?
Ooh, yeah, I've definitely been guilty of just nodding and moving on in those situations. I'm always so worried about saying the wrong thing. I totally miss the opportunity to actually learn something interesting.
I get it. But those open-ended questions, they can make such a difference. It shows that you're actually interested and encourages them to share more than just those surface-level details.
What if the conversation feels hopelessly stuck in small talk mode, though? Is there anything we can do to shift gears without seeming rude?
Of course. You can always try introducing a thought-provoking topic, naturally. For example, you could say something like, this reminds me of something I was reading the other day about insert interesting topic. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great idea. It's not forced, but it opens the door to a more stimulating conversation. I'm definitely going to try that next time I'm in that small talk rut.
Yeah. It's all about being intentional with those responses and finding those little ways to guide the conversation in a direction that feels more, authentic to you.
That makes sense. But what about those times when you're just not feeling up to socializing at all? I mean, we can't always steer every interaction, right?
You're so right. And that's where setting boundaries becomes crucial. Introverts don't have to force themselves into every single conversation. It's totally okay to prioritize your well-being.
So it's about recognizing your limits and knowing when to engage and when to, politely step away.
Exactly. If you're feeling drained socially, it's totally fine to take a break. You could excuse yourself to grab a drink, step outside for some air, or even just say, it was great chatting, but I need to go catch up with someone over there,
Yeah. It's so easy to feel obligated to stay in a conversation, even when it's sucking the energy out of it. I love that reminder that it's okay to step away and recharge.
For sure. And remember, quality over quantity. Instead of trying to socialize with everyone at a gathering, try to focus on having a few really meaningful conversations that energize rather than deplete.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in that idea that we need to be on all the time, but focusing on the quality of our interactions, that can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. It's about being intentional with your energy and prioritizing those connections that feel genuine and fulfilling.
The video also mentions some introvert-friendly conversation techniques. I'd love to hear more about those.
Yeah, one technique that can be especially helpful for introvert is to use observation-based comment to ease into a conversation. So instead of feeling pressured to come up with something, super brilliant to say, they can start by commenting on something in the surroundings.
Oh, could you give an example?
Sure. Let's say you're at an art gallery. You could say something like, that piece over there really caught my eye. What do you think of it? Or, if you're at a party and there's music playing, you might say, I love this song. Do you know who it's by?
That's a much less intimidating way to start a conversation than trying to come up with some witty anecdote or something.
Exactly. It's a subtle way to engage without feeling like you have to dominate the conversation.
What other techniques did the video suggest?
Another great one is to master the art of asking open-ended questions. So instead of asking, did you have a good weekend? Try, what was the highlight of your weekend?
Oh, I see the difference. Asking an open-ended question like that invites the other person to share more than just a one-word answer.
Exactly. It encourages them to elaborate and tell a story, which can lead to a way more engaging conversation. And this is something introverts are often really good at, active listening.
Yeah, because we're not always comfortable being the center of attention. Introverts tend to be really good.
Exactly. Instead of feeling like you need to constantly come up with things to say, you can just focus on really listening and asking thoughtful follow-up questions. And, people love to talk about themselves, so this can be a really effective way to build rapport.
I love that. We don't always have to be the life of the party to create a connection. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is just listen and show genuine interest.
So true. And lastly, don't be afraid to lean into shared interests. Like if you find a topic that you're genuinely curious about, use that as an opportunity to delve a little deeper and create a more meaningful connection.
Yeah, that's so true. When you're talking about something you're passionate about, even small talk can be coming.
Exactly. It's all about finding those little points of connection and letting your authentic self shine through. Remember, true connection is not about how much you talk or how outgoing you seem. It's about the quality of the interactions you have.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for dealing with small talk now. But I'm also realizing that it's not just about those individual strategies. It's about creating a more inclusive social culture in general.
100%. We need to challenge this idea that extroversion is the only way to be social. And that starts with having open conversations about, different social styles and preferences.
I think a lot of us are craving that kind of inclusivity, whether we identify as introverts or not. We all benefit from creating spaces that honor those different ways of being and connect.
I agree. When we embrace diversity in how we socialize, we create a way richer and more vibrant social landscape for everyone.
I have a feeling our listeners are probably buzzing with thoughts and questions right now.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's feeling kind of overwhelmed by all this information?
I just say, first of all, you're not alone. A lot of people, especially introverts, they struggle with these demands of small talk, and it's okay to feel that way. The important thing to remember is that you have choice. You can choose to engage, you can choose to step away, and you can choose to advocate for more inclusive social space.
That's such an empowering message. It's not about conforming to some external standard of good or bad social behavior. It's about understanding yourself and finding ways to navigate this social world in a way that feels true to who you are.
Exactly. And remember, even small changes can make a huge difference. You can start by trying just one new technique, setting just one boundary, or having just one conversation about your social preferences. It's all about taking those small steps and celebrating your progress along the way.
So we've talked a lot about reframing small talk and navigating those inevitable interactions. But what about redesigning social gatherings from the ground up? Is it even possible to create spaces that are more introvert friendly by design?
That's a really interesting question. And honestly, I think it's something we need to explore way more deeply. We often just accept the status quo when it comes to social events. But what if we could create spaces that actually cater to different social styles?
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I'm already imagining all the possibilities.
Me too. And I think that's where we should pick up in part 3, right? We'll dive into that exciting realm of redesigning social gatherings to be more inclusive and enjoyable forever.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we unleash our creativity and envision a social landscape where introverts really thrive. Okay, so let's totally shift gears here and get those creative. Last time we were talking about how current social gatherings sometimes feel like they're designed for extroverts. So what if we could completely flip the script? What if we reimagine these spaces so that they're truly inclusive for every introvert?
Oh, I love that. It's so easy to just accept the way things are, but imagining new possibilities is where real change, right?
Yeah, for sure. So let's brainstorm. If you could design the perfect introvert-friendly gathering, what would that even look like? What elements would you include to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and has the energy to participate?
Well, I think first I'd really think about the environment, Instead of a loud, super crowded space with blaring music, I'd create a more calming atmosphere, maybe with soft lighting and some ambient sounds, even some nature sounds, or just some instrumental music playing in the background.
Ooh, I love that. I can already feel my anxiety going down just thinking about it. What about designated quiet zones too, little nooks or corners where people can retreat if they need a break from all the stimulation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Having spaces where people can recharge or just have quieter conversations one-on-one would be so essential. We could even have a cozy library corner with comfy seating and bookshelves filled with interesting stuff.
Yes. And instead of one giant overwhelming space, maybe we could have smaller, more intimate areas where people can connect in smaller groups.
That's such a good idea. Smaller breakout areas would allow for those more meaningful conversations without the pressure of having to perform for a big crowd. You could even have designated areas for certain activities like, board games or art projects.
Yeah.
Or even just like quiet contemplation.
Right. And think about the activities too. Instead of those typical party games or like forced mingling, what if we had activities that encourage deeper engagement and connection?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm picturing things like guided group discussions on thought-provoking topics or like collaborative art projects, even like interactive storytelling sessions.
Yeah.
Activities that spark curiosity and encourage people to share their thoughts and ideas in a safe, supportive environment.
I am so on board with that. It would be so refreshing to go to a social gathering and not feel that pressure, small talk, or pretend to be someone I'm.
Right. Imagine how much more fulfilling those interactions would be if everyone just felt comfortable being their true, authentic self.
I think this whole idea of redesigning social spaces, it goes way beyond just introverts and extroverts. It's about recognizing that we all have different social needs and preferences. And when we create environments that actually honor those differences, it creates a richer and a way more inclusive experience for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about shifting that focus from quantity to quality, for those superficial interactions to genuine connection.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of small talk and introversion, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. Next time you're planning a social gathering, think about how you can incorporate some of these ideas. How can you create a space that feels welcoming and inclusive for all different personality types?
Yeah, and even if you're not planning a gathering anytime soon, think about how you can apply these principles to your everyday interactions. How can you reframe those small talk moments? How can you set those boundaries and engage in ways that feel authentic and energizing to you?
Remember, true connection. It's not about conforming to these social norms or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about embracing your unique strengths, honoring your own needs, and finding ways to connect with others on a much deeper level.
Keep diving deep, everyone, and let's all continue to create a world where we all feel comfortable and connected, no matter what our social style.